This video is going to help you get more wins in squad busters, and it's all about finishers, units that you draft to attack an enemy's squad and bust them for all their gems. These units are not the ones that you pick at the start of the match, potentially. They're the ones that you can take at the very end to top off your squad and get an absolutely sick win. And we saw some unexpected finishers in the Squad Busters $50,000 Samsung Galaxy tournament, where Classy used 2 Ice Wizards to absolutely shred somebody. So I'm going to break this down because when I was drafting, okay, I was looking like, hey, what are my finishers? But there are some units I wasn't considering, like the Ice Wizard, that actually do need to be in contention here. And you may be wondering, like, Chisgule, what exactly do you mean by a finisher? Could you give me an example? And the single best finisher in the game is the Ultra BK. And of course, we're dropping all of this in a tier list to rank them all out. But he is a class of his own with the Super Rage spell. Yes, 100% extra damage for, like, what is it, 15 seconds is disgusting. And you can get multiple and it stacks. So that is the single most disgusting finisher in the game. Oh, by the way, the BK also has stuns, which are very disruptive to the enemy squad. So I would put that as the single best finisher. And there are probably a couple other finishers you can think of, by the way, that you're very familiar with. Like, for example, we could talk about the Queen, who only needs to be about at the super tier. You don't need to go to the ultra tier for the Archer Queen to be an outstanding finisher. And I just need to cruise through and find her. Where are you hiding? Oh, all the way at the bottom. I'm going to drop her up at an A. So the way that the Archer Queen works as a finisher is by making everything in your squad to attack way faster that is ranged. And if you've got some tanks, if you've got some Shellys, if you've got some Jessies, the majority of the great units are ranged. Pam is ranged, Medic is ranged, Colt is ranged, Dynamite is ranged. Even a lot of your economy-based units, like your Mavis, is going to be ranged. Nita's got an element that's ranged. All your range damage goes through the roof. That is a way you take out an enemy squad, is you just crank the DPS. And I think the Queen is a top tier finisher. Now, of course, there are units that are obviously not finishers. They're not units you actually draft at the end to take out enemy squads. Like, for example, Bo is not a finisher. Dr. T is not a finisher. Greg is not a finisher. Mavis. I mean, we could just clear all of these out of here just to make it really clear. Goblin is not a finisher. Trader is not a finisher. Who else doesn't go in here? Medic and Pam set you up to finish the fight, but are not finishers. Bandit is not a finisher. They do give you economy at the last second, but they're really not there to finish out an enemy squad. Same is true of the Penny. She can give you amazing gem value that could make you win. We're talking about the units that finish off enemy squads, all right? So we've got BK at the top. We've got the Queen down below, and I want to give a good example of like a B tier and a C tier. And at the B tier, I actually think I want to put the B because the area of effect damage from the Bs is pretty freaking outstanding. Actually, it's really outstanding. You do need to go get a B, but as far as finishing off an enemy squad, it's pretty sweet. And as I look at this, gosh, there's like a couple other units we need to take out of here that are not finishers either. I would say that the Royale King does not fit. I would say that the Mortis does not fit. Nita is not there to close out squads. We also need to probably just take the Battle Healer, who's got amazing utility at the end. Like, topping off with a Battle Healer is really cool, and it's very good, but it's not how you finish an enemy squad, right? You're not going to burst them out with your Battle Healer. You might beat them because of the Battle Healer, but it's not giving you a thing you needed to end an enemy, right? Whereas, let's drop the tank in. I'm gonna put the tank in at a C. Tank is probably a tier below the B. It's good frontline, but the way that the tank works as a finisher is that you can pop enemy units. And if you pop a few other units, you might now have their whole squad vulnerable and they may no longer be able to fight you. So that gives you an example of every tier. S tier with the BK. Queen at A, because accelerated attack speed on all your range stuff is amazing. B at a B because the AoE DPS is very good, and a tank at C. But now we actually need to flesh this out a good bit. And I almost feel like I need to add like a row below here. And we almost need like a D tier for this, because there are units that, like, I mean, if you have them, it's the best you got, and they'll do what they can do, but we're going to drop it in. There we go. This is better. I think this is better. We'll put that up over there, the tank, all right? Because there are units that, like, help you. They're not really finishers, but they're important. Like, the chicken giving you speed is important. The Colt, okay, does in fact do area of effect damage. It's technically more like pierce damage. The bullets can pierce. It is relevant. Like, a Barbarian is not really a great finisher. Heavy is not really a great finisher, but they are, like, combat units that, I mean, kind of. Hog is, like, also, you could draft it at the end. It gives you speed. You need that speed to ambush. Like, it is important, but it's not really finisher. The Jesse does not at all qualify. Not really doing anything that would sway the fight hugely in your favor. Similarly, I'm really torn where to put, like, this unit, the El Primo. And we're moving all the unimportant units first. We'll talk about a few really important ones at the end here. But, like, the El Primo's stun can close out a fight for you, but it's, like, really not a finisher. Same is true of a Shelly. I'm going to put them down at D for now as, like, honorable mentions above the rest of the not a finisher category, but I just don't think it's all that exciting. Max, technically, the speed might be the reason you could finish somebody, right? These all are, like, this same category of, like, it ain't quite it. It's cool, but it ain't quite it. The Witch, we're going to drop over here. And this only leaves a small number of units, you may realize, which, like, yes, there are not many finishers in Squad Buster. There really aren't. Okay. And I think Dynamite, we need to drop all the way up at the B tier. Actually, Dynamite can be your win condition in a team fight. It might sound crazy, but the area of effect damage is insane. And it will be a massive difference maker. And you've seen it. If you've actually used a Dynamite, you know that actually it can be a finisher. And once we start to think about Dynamite as a finisher, rather than a unit you're drafting in the middle to boost your DPS versus what, like PvE stuff, like, he's not really for that. He's for fighting other squads, large squads, and, like, okay, Royal Haunt, I guess. But he is actually a very scary finisher when used right. But the scarier finisher is actually the Ice Wizard. We need to drop it in an A. The Ice Wizard is a very good finisher. There's two things that he's offering. First of all, the spell can be enough to simply close out an enemy, but his area of effect damage is actually kind of disgusting. It's so disgusting. It is literally what Sir Claz attributes to one of his wins. And he, like, it's like, yes, I very intentionally drafted 2 Ice Wizards, and, like, GG, got him. And, like, yes, he did. It did the thing. So we're going to put that in at the A tier. And then finally, the regular wizard. Now, why is the regular wizard in this list? Well, he does do splash damage, and also he lets you have a second spell slot. And if you can actually get 2 really good spells, it is pretty amazing. You do need to do a fair amount of work, and you may not actually, he's, like, not inherently going to do this thing for you. I'd probably put him at a C as, like, a closer. In the early game, I suppose if you had him and you get a couple lightning spells, you could end somebody before the match even really begins. But we're talking about finishing out a match, closing out enemy squads. So from my perspective, if you go to draft in Squad Busters, you look for your front line. What are your options going to be? Sometimes there's only one. You look for your healers. Sometimes there is only one. You'd better draft the healer when that's the case. Otherwise, if you don't draft it when it shows up, you could be hurting for HP. Speed is something you look for. And finally, finishers. Now, I was looking at this, but I wasn't considering units that I think I should have considered. I think I should have been considering the Ice Wizard. I wasn't. I wasn't considering the B really a finisher, but it is. And the Dynamite especially, I was not considering a finisher. But once you start to realize that's actually the role that it fills very, very well, now you start to look at your drafts differently for what is the combination of things that I can draft to close out an enemy. And here's the thing. When you study a draft, and there are not many finishers, what that means is that you should look to economy-based strategies because you are much less likely to get burst out because nobody's got the sorts of things that can end you in a heartbeat. Okay? Stuns can end you in a heartbeat, by the way, which is why, like, Shelly is actually super relevant here. One Shelly stun throwing off your squad could actually end your day in a hyper-competitive lobby. I would know. That Samsung Galaxy 50K tournament lobby, one knockback and it was over. Literally, that was it, because someone else would third party you and you were dead. That was the whole thing. And always, every single time, someone was in position to capitalize on that, by the way. Always, every time. GG, like one knockback and you were cooked. It's actually just insane. So when you look at your draft, hopefully you'll consider these things. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments as to what units you like to draft to close out an enemy, and if you actually would play differently based on the presence of finishers in the draft or not. Once you're in Squad League, this matters a whole heck of a lot more. Up until Squad League, everybody has their own individualized drafts, so in some ways it doesn't matter as much because you can't predict what sorts of finishers will be out there. But the combination of what's available in the draft, plus the game mod, and I suppose how tough the lobby is, makes a big difference. If you want to see the biggest learning I had, however, from the Samsung Galaxy tournament, check the card right over here in the end screen. It's about how I got busted, not managing my, we'll call it territory, as well as I could have. And once you realize that, you're in a much better position to avoid getting wrecked by one of these finishers.